Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 15 of The Meeting Place. Today's guest is Sauliha Alli, who is another recent grad of UTSC. She just finished up her Honors Bachelor of Science at UTSC and is staying close to her roots by attending U of T's medical school in the fall. Sauliha and I talk about the importance of picking a major that gets you the education you really want out of your university experience. We also talk about a trip she took to Ghana as a Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Scholar in 2019, and how that has influenced what she's doing with an NGO that she has co-created. You might notice my audio quality isn't as good on this episode, and that's just because I'm recording from a different location. But don't worry, I let her do most of the talking anyway. Take a listen to my interview with Sauliha. So welcome to today's guest, Sauliha. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing well also. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. And I'm glad you're going to be here to share your experience at UTSC because you just graduated last month, didn't you?
Yes, I did, in my backyard.
In your backyard. I was going to say, what did you do? Did your family get together and live stream it?
Yeah, so what actually happened was before we weren't planning on doing anything. And then on the morning of, my dad wakes up, he's like, "It's your graduation. We need to celebrate." And I was like, where was this planning a week ago? Then we all go downstairs and we're watching the entire ceremony on the TV. And then I don't know what happened, but I feel like midway through the day, my parents were feeling guilty or something. And they were they started organizing this backyard convocation, and then my dad pretended to be Merrick Gertler, and my sister pretended to carry a mace, and they had a fake ceremony and everything, fake awards, fake diplomas. Yeah, it was a bit much, but it was kind of nice.
That sounds pretty intense. How's your dad's impersonation of Merrick? Was it on point?
Yeah, I think it was nearly there, but he had his own level of spunk to it. So maybe a revised version of Merrick Gertler, more appropriate to my family.
Perfect. So when you were still a student at UTSC, you got an Honors Bachelor of Science in Neuroscience, Psychology, and a French citation. Now, strangely enough, the thing I'm most interested in asking about there is French citation, because I've not actually heard it referred to as a citation. Is that a certificate or a minor on top of your major programs?
Yeah, so it's actually different from a minor. What it is if you take, I think it's maybe 6 courses, I don't even remember the number, in French, then you can get a citation that says basically you studied another language. So I was originally looking at doing a minor, but because of the program I was originally in, which was the Neuroscience Specialist Co-op, I couldn't really fit it all in. So I just settled to do the language citation bit, and I wanted to continue learning French when I was in university. So yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like you did switch your program slightly in your time at university.
I did, yes. I switched it because after completing my co-op work term at CAMH, I realized that there was a lot that I was missing in terms of having a very interdisciplinary education. The Neuroscience Specialist program is really good, but it goes into a lot of detail about, biology, and there's some psychology in there, but I just felt to fully understand the health care field, which is what I was interested in, and a lot of social issues, which were beginning to interest me in the time, I needed to have a more diverse education. And I decided to switch my major into psychology. So I did a double major. And then as well, I started adding on a lot of courses in social sciences and philosophy. So yeah, I tried to move away from having a very concentrated education after returning from CAMH.
But you know what? That's great that you had that experience. I love when students come on here and have the experience of having switched their programs slightly, because I think there's this perception when you go into university, this is what I'm going to do. And then that changes so regularly for so many students that it's good to hear from the experience of students who've done that. And it's really been a positive outcome for them, because, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I imagine you're going to tell me that you had a good experience academically at UTSC.
Yes, I did. And honestly, the surprising thing is just like you, the thing that I find most interesting in what I studied was actually those courses that were not my major. Maybe I need to do some self-exploring. But I think like philosophy became one of like those interests that I just was so happy. Like anytime I would take a course in it, I would just like spend so much time studying for those courses and kind of put some of my other major stuff on the back burner. But yeah, I'm a big advocate for like interdisciplinary education, because I think the way that we design, curricula now in academia, it's in a way that, gives us very in-depth knowledge of a field, but that comes at the expense of having a different perspective about thinking about issues. And yes, we can have collaboration on, these diverse teams and hear from people who have, different perspectives, but to actually have all of that knowledge, within one person, I think it integrates in a different way and can really be a driver of like creativity and problem solving.
So you've definitely put some thought into why you ended up doing these programs.
I did. I thought a lot about it after.
Oh, that's perfect. That's great, because now you're going to get to explain it to hopefully a bunch of incoming students who are listening to this. Now, I'm curious, from the very beginning, you mentioned a little bit a few minutes ago that you wanted to go into healthcare. Did you know that coming out of high school? And is that what influenced the program you picked when you first got to UTSC?
Yeah, so I was one of those kids that like wanted to be a doctor since I was really young. At that time, I had a very naive understanding of what that meant. My grandma had actually like suffered from like a fracture when I was quite young, and I sort of became like a little caregiver for her, grandma's little helper, if you will. I used to sort of, go there, bring her food, just sort of be nurturing. And I think that was when I was kind of like, oh, I enjoy this. And my parents were like, ooh, you should be a doctor. Of course, I went through high school sort of with that at the back of my mind. I was in the IB program, which is very focused on STEM. It's a lot of kids who kind of want to pursue, right, health or science-related professions. But I think, honestly, when I knew for sure was after I started doubting. And I think doubt is such an important thing to have, like, to really understand, like, what it is that makes us tick. And I started doubting more when I was in, I want to say, my fourth year. And that's because, this passion to do community service and international development work really surfaced. And at that time, I was thinking of actually just working in international development and not pursuing medicine. And, what I realized from that was I did a lot of reflecting and journaling and things. And I realized that what medicine is about, community service is a huge part of that. International development now has become, interjected into medical practice. It's still very much on the sidelines, but, medicine was a field that would allow me to do all of that. But at the same time, do all of these other things that aligned, very personally with me, which was, I would have that bioethics bit. I would have that bit of being like a lifelong learner, and to sort of like set my own goals for learning, to be able to go into teaching and research was a lot easier with that degree. And of course, you can't neglect the part about spending time with patients. I really like that sort of social aspect of the profession, and just sort of being that figure that patients can rely on and come and confide in. So I think I just needed more introspection as to what medicine was and to really understand what it was about. But I was able to circle back to it after, sort of eschewing it for a bit of time. Yeah.
So, you sound like that doctor that everybody hopes their doctor actually is. So that's great to hear, because I think, and you told me when we did your audio test that is the next step for you, right? Medical school?
Yeah, so starting in fall, I'll be going to U of T Med. they're still deciding. I think it's most likely going to be online, which is kind of sad. I was looking forward to orientation. Right. I was looking forward to, all of the in-person fun stuff. I'm there for the social part of it.
Yeah, the education's secondary. If you weren't doing the education, you couldn't do the social stuff. So it just hand in hand.
Yeah, exactly. But we'll see how it goes. I have some friends who are there, so that should make it a lot more fun. And yeah, I'm looking forward.
That's great. Why did you decide to stick with your roots and go for U of T med school?
Yeah, so kind of like what I was mentioning a bit earlier. So actually, after I went to Ghana, it was at that time that I think and I guess, should I give a little bit more background about that?
We'll get into that.
We'll go in there. Okay.
The Ghana stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So, after I went to Ghana and I was sort of there and embedded in this new culture and sort of away from my normal social supports, away from this, I guess, U of T in general, where a lot of my connections and my professional experiences are, I just had a lot of time to kind of figure out like who I was and what I wanted to do. And I guess I just realized that there were bigger issues than what medicine could address. So, I was surrounded by kids who were in international development. Many of them had studied social sciences. I think I was actually the only person who went on that trip who didn't come from a social sciences background. And like the psychology major that I did, it was the way that they do it at U of T. It's very scientific, right? It's not necessarily scientific, but it's focused more on the biological side of things, and it's classified as a life science instead of a social science. So sort of being exposed to IDS and that a different way of thinking, which was a more systems level, thinking more about, how history, how culture sort of socially constructs the knowledge that we have. I sort of thought more about the types of problems that medical knowledge could solve versus having a more broader understanding of things, which, international development can afford a student. And that's sort of when I started to doubt, because I was like, well, this medical model that medicine is founded on, it's focused a lot on sort of like a biological understanding of disease. But we now know that like disease is influenced by a lot of things. Social determinants of health is a huge one. And to really, improve lives and change people's outcomes in a way that's meaningful, which had always been something that I, was a driver of any sort of endeavor I had taken, I realized that I needed a broader framework from which I operated. And I think that is where I started to doubt. But, coming back to it, I realized that, this field of global health was kind of like an intersection between the two. And I didn't need to give up, doing my community development and international development work as a physician. In fact, having that medical knowledge was a way of adding to that. So, yeah, I think that was sort of the realization that made me sort of shy away from it. And then realizing that, medicine is moving towards a more interdisciplinary focus, and that I could actually be one of the people who could change that narrative of medicine by working in like this field of global health. I eventually came back to it. I think there were a lot of things that were pulling me both ways, and I think medicine sort of ultimately does stand at the intersection of a lot of my interests. So yeah, that's why I came back.
Okay, fantastic. Now, I guess we should backtrack a bit and talk about how the whole Ghana trip came about. Was that because of some of the previous experiences you'd had, kind of extracurricular activities that you were involved in at U of T, or did that come up from a totally different branch of interest?
Yeah, so that came from a lot of the extracurriculars I had done. So what happened was when I was in third year, that sort of transition, I was at CAMH at the time, so I don't even count it as a year because I wasn't really studying.
Right.
So I was president of HBSc UTSC, and I know you had Miriam on the show a little earlier, and she talked a little bit more about that.
Mm-hmm.
And
I actually think the HOSA president for this coming year reached out to me about being on the show as well. So
okay,
we're going to
that's
talk
great.
quite a bit about what HOSA's plans are for this upcoming year at some point.
Yeah, so I was part of that. I was also part of BIOSA, and I enjoyed that. And a lot of my friends, I had a few friends who were like, why do you spend all of your time on extracurriculars? Like, I would be spending more time on that. I would say almost equal amounts of time doing my full-time job and doing that. It's like every evening I would just, I have meetings for clubs and like plan events. And I think both of those were very, rigorous commitments. There was a lot of time involved in those.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like time never flew by when I would do it because of the fact that, I was working with students who were my age. They had the same vision. We all really
Did you say time never flew by or time flew by?
Sorry, yes, time flew by. Like in the sense that I never counted the time going by.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Because I was like, isn't the saying time flies when you're having fun? You make it sound like it droned on and there's so much work. But no, I'm sure you enjoyed it. That's why you did it.
Yes, yeah. But then after leaving that, what I realized was it was so great to be involved on campus, but I wanted to be part of something that was a little bit broader than that. And I had done some things that, made like an impact in the local community. But I was thinking, how can I take this to a global level? How can I make an impact sort of in a different setting? And one that, was really personally connected to me because I come from a developing country. I guess we don't really use that term. A country from the global south, I guess, is the most currently agreed upon word to use. And a lot of the experiences I had, growing up there for the first 6-7 years of my life, were very relatable to the experience that I had when I was in Ghana. And my parents also, had grown up there. And sort of in arriving there, I just felt that personal connection to the beneficiaries that I was working with. And I was grateful to have a global impact in whatever I was doing, and also to develop skills working in a highly cross-cultural setting, which we do have to some extent here in UTSC, but we're talking about different kinds of cultural differences and immersing in a completely different country. So there were different learning experiences I think that afforded me.
Okay, great. And so I know that when you did come back from Ghana, you were able to talk about that experience in a TED Talk for TED UTSC. So was that a choice that you made, or did somebody approach you about that? How did that come up?
Yeah, so I actually reached out about speaking. I had wanted to sort of do a TED Talk a bit earlier, but at that time, I wasn't too sure about what I would talk about. I was thinking maybe I could talk about my research. But when I was abroad, I think just because of a lot of the insights that I gained from the work that I was doing and from, the perspective that I had, it just felt right to go and speak about that. It felt very meaningful, and I felt that the background I had as a life sciences student going and, working in that field and the things that I learned and how it sort of shaped my view of our, education system, I guess, at UTSC, I thought that maybe there was something that I could share there. So yeah, I reached out, and the rest is history, I guess.
Yeah. Well, for any students who are maybe considering doing something like that themselves, if they feel they have a story worth telling, how was that experience? Did you think it was a really positive experience? You're glad you did it?
Yeah, 100%. And I think whenever you go into something, sometimes we're not really aware of what we learn from what we do. Like we go in and we think, oh, I have this, I can offer this. And I think maybe that comes from the application process and you have to sell yourself in some way. But there was so much that I learned from doing that TED Talk. And I think a really big one was, how important it is to just solicit feedback. And the way we do assignments and things like that, in most courses, it's not focused very much on that peer review process. And and I think there's a lot of issues around academic integrity and things like that, which is probably what precludes professors from encouraging that kind of work. But with the TED Talk, I was able to consult with an entire team. I even started consulting with some professors and some of my friends that were in medical school, some that were, doing other sort of community service work, and people from international development. And I was just really grateful to be part of that like feedback process, and a process of sort of like personal, continuous development and improvement. I rehearsed that talk so many times. I think my entire family got so annoyed of me. Like I would literally stand behind this wall here, and I had like a fake monitor set up and a fake clicker, and I was just rehearsing. And I think I became
like a serious dress rehearsal.
Like a serious dress rehearsal, like 2 days, no interruptions, 20-minute break for food, then you're back at it again. And then what I realized from that was just how much we can learn by just, listening to others, but as well like observing ourselves and doing things, over and over again. And eventually I became more mindful of like my posture, more mindful of, where I was putting emphasis. And I think it really just calls a lot of attention to delivery and, how to communicate without even using words. Like your body language is a lot of what delivers the message. So yeah, I'm really, really grateful for that. And I think it made me a better public speaker. So yeah.
Well, that's great. The experience doing this podcast is like similar and so different at the same time,
it's
because
so different.
I don't have to worry about posture. Nobody's going to see what I look like when I'm putting up the audio from this, or you for that matter, right? But the thing you do notice then is you listen back to the audio and you're like, that's what I sound like? Do I really pause between all my sentences like that? And all these things I didn't know before that now I'm like, oh, I got to get better at this. Like it does, you learn to like practice things and try and be better at them. And I really like what you said about reflecting on your experience, and it allowed you to really do that, because that's certainly something that I'm not sure if students have the time always to think about that and to really reflect on what they've learned in classes or in extracurriculars or whatever it may be. There's so often this idea, and maybe I'm way off here, but from what I remember and from what my friends did and people I work with now, it's like you just got to get through the course. You just got to finish the course. But the real objective is to learn something. And how many people think back later to like, oh, well, I remember when we went through this topic and this is what I learned from a course perspective. I think it might be a little bit easier to do when it comes to extracurriculars, because if you're in a job interview one day and they ask about like conflict management and you get to talk about how you were involved in the club and you had that experience where you had to work your way through a certain issue with club members, it just seems more obvious, I think, than some of the learning, which is more, it's like unconscious learning. You're doing it, but I don't know if people think so much about all the learning they are doing instead of just like getting that knowledge.
Yeah, I think you're so right. And honestly, even for myself, and this is, I would say mainly in first and second year, I didn't really think about the material that I would learn. Like I would go there and be like, okay, I need to get this mark. And then I would have like an Excel spreadsheet where it was like, okay, minimum this on this, this and this. All right, there. That's how I get what I want. And I think because of the fact that the environment is so competitive, reflection, there's a danger in reflecting, which is it leads us to a level of uncertainty, right? And I think when we have too much uncertainty, it can really lead to inaction. So people are afraid of reflecting for that reason, I think. At least me. I mean, thinking critically.
No, I think you're totally right. Like, yeah. So I'm a little bit older. I'm 8 years out of school, and I see that exactly what you were describing, the way you were in your first couple of years. Like, your objective was to get the grade, not to learn. Not that I'm saying you weren't trying to learn, but that wasn't the focus, right? You're like, I need the grade. That's what I need. And I don't think it's a core part of what a lot of people do, is just reflecting on the experience they had and what they've gained from that experience. I don't.
It's not. And, I think that's why clubs are such an important part of student life, because that is where that sphere of reflection really comes to life, because you are, and I mean, especially if you're doing a club that's related to what you're studying in some way, like Biosa and HOSA, they were kind of related to what I was interested in and what I was learning, but it sort of created that environment where I could actually engage in a very practical way about those concepts. And yeah, I think that's where more of that critical reflection can come in, is when you have that practical experience supplementing what you're learning. So yeah.
Yeah. And I also think that you mentioned uncertainty and inaction, and I can totally relate to that. But what I think I want to point out with that is that's never going to go away for everyone. So for some people, like me included, there's always that uncertainty. Like I've been in my job, my career for 7 odd years, and I'm like, do I know what I'm doing? I'm not sure, And so the uncertainty, you can't let that stop you from trying something. And I think the most relevant example for me right now is Orientation Week is primarily an in-person event, and we can't do it that way this year.
Yeah.
And so we are having to adapt and pivot and change things entirely. But no one's 100% comfortable with any online tool, and none of us are experts at it. And I think a lot of the staff I'm working with in the last 2-3 weeks have realized that just start planning, just pick a time frame and just start working on it, and it will come together. But there's a lot of voices involved, and I think there is so much uncertainty because it's different. But like that's life. It's always, things are always going to change and be different. You just gotta go with it.
Exactly. You have to learn to be tolerant of uncertainty. And I think going back to the whole, way of learning about things is, once we become very specialized in our education, we begin to, it gives us a sense of security that we've sort of moved past a level of uncertainty because we're so deep in what we're learning. But the more diverse, fields of study you incorporate into your degree or however you learn, the more you become tolerant of that ambiguity, and you kind of welcome that in a way, because you realize there really is no right answer. There is no capital T truth. It's many different truths, and so many factors play into what that is defined as. So, yeah.
I had a boss at one of my old jobs who gave this great analogy, and he used it about the idea of studying one topic so much that you kind of forget about what's around you, and you get uncertain about everything else. And so the analogy was kind of, if you're standing in a room, a square room, and you're in one corner, the topic you want to learn about is in the far corner. But on either side of you is another corner that's far away. And the more you study the topic that you want to be an expert in, the closer you're walking to that far corner, the less of the other corners you're going to be able to see. Wow. And so you start to lose focus on everything else that's going on around you. And so you don't want to let that happen. You want to be studying and focused on the topic that you want to learn, without forgetting the fact that there's different things you're not an expert of around you that you can always learn about, instead of just becoming, I forget the word I'm looking for, but when you just can't see them anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
It's one of my favorite analogies.
Yeah, I think it's so true.
Now let's talk about when you got back from Ghana, you started up your own NGO. So tell me about that and how that whole process happened and what the organization does. I'm going to butcher the name again, so I'm just going to let you say it and then tell me where that name comes from.
So when I was volunteering abroad, I was one of the Queen Elizabeth Scholars. So there were a few of them who were selected from our campus. And we volunteered for an organization known as World University Service of Canada, or WUSC. So they are an international organization that focuses a lot on volunteer cooperation. They sort of just have a lot of experience sending volunteers abroad. So while I was in Ghana, I was working on a project for them, and that involved, creating like a health and safety training for construction workers. What ended up happening, this was totally unexpected, but I had a colleague who, told me about some of the work that she was doing in the broader community. And as a QE scholar, our mandate was a slightly different than the IDS students. We had to basically do like a community engagement aspect. So a way of like engaging the broader community that was outside of the mandate. And that could be anything. It could be like a speech, it could be a blog post. But I had a lot of sort of event planning experience from HOSA, and I thought, why don't we do like an event? And I'm kind of an advocate for events because I think they really bring together people in a very different way than other forms of outreach do. And, I had been volunteering in this community that I went to visit, where a lot of women were becoming pregnant at the age of 13. So teenage pregnancy was a huge issue and sort of a very underserved community in terms of healthcare. We just have one clinic with 2 nurses that serves the region. And a lot of women were leaving school by the time that they were in middle school. So, in visiting there and sort of speaking with the woman, and there was a language barrier, but, just sort of hearing them share their stories and sharing my own experiences, I just felt very connected to them because a lot of these women were, single mothers. And I have, a number of women in my family who had that experience and also came from, I wasn't even born in the capital city of Guyana, where I'm from. I'm from a more remote community. And, the challenges are similar. I mean, not exactly the same. So that was part of what really drew me in. And I just found so much more meaning in doing that. And I said, why don't we organize like a reproductive health seminar? And I guess it's sort of like my healthcare background that came in. But what was different about this is, compared to some of the other events that I had planned while I was on campus, for HOSA and BIOSA, which had a very strong biology lens, it was kind of like one of the first times that I said, let's try to get many different perspectives on this. And let's invite, for example, someone who works for like an NGO that does like outreach on like AIDS and other sort of sexual health issues. And let's invite the chiefs and have their perspective on the issue to make sure that we're being culturally appropriate. And let's, invite the police officers and talk about the legal aspect of things. And let's just bring these issues that have been in this community for so many years and are seldom discussed. Let's bring these to the forefront. And we had a really great turnout. We had 400 people that showed up. And it's so funny because we had no funding to do this event. Like, I remember when we had the idea, it was just me and I was working with Na, who was my co-founder. And we just sort of like put our own financial resources into things. And I was like, I'm going to reach out and see if we can get like some sponsorships. And BIOSA actually sponsored and were part of this. We ended up having an event and sort of became like the landmark event for our NGO. And now, Yayra-Si Youth Foundation, we continue to do that. We provide, health education to women and youth, but as well, we supplement that with vocational training. Because to sort of pull women out of these cycles of teenage pregnancy, it's very closely tied up to their economic empowerment. And
right.
Yes. So
you have to have a skill to be able to make money for yourself, to not maybe, I don't know, like the right word to use there. I don't want to say fall into that lifestyle. It's not, but like everyone's got to do something, so you've got to have a skill set in order to be able to kind of make a living for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very true. And I mean, we did some needs-based analyses in the community as well, because we wanted to be sure that we weren't coming in with this Western lens of, this is a place of suffering. This is a place of, just issues, any issue and every issue. We really wanted to speak to locals and see, is this perceived as a problem? What are the priorities that we need addressed in this community? And, they really shared in these concerns, and they also, raised this issue of, vocational education and skills, because a lot of times what is happening is because women don't have their own source of income, they are financially dependent on males, and this sort of leads to this power asymmetry where they feel kind of pressured into having sexual relations, and it's a very complex issue.
Obviously I can't fully imagine what that's like, because it's not the life I've lived, but I can, I can see how when when you have little other options because you don't have the ability to make that living for yourself, that you end up becoming reliant on someone else for food, right? And so you end up with, you've got to get married and you've got to have a kid because that's the pattern. That's how things happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So now you're back and you are in your summer right before med school, and you've got your NGO, and you've got your Gordon Cressy Student Leadership Award, and you had your Jubilee scholarship. So you have clearly had a very successful university experience. And so I just want to say congratulations on that whole situation, because it's obviously, it sounds like you've enjoyed it along the way. Like, I'm sure it was a lot of hard work, but you don't sound like you're burnt out from the whole experience.
I think my team would beg to differ. They'd be like, let's see what they say. But thank you. I appreciate that. Yes. And I think one thing that I really opened up my eyes to from going abroad and, having these kind of conversations with people from a different background from me was realizing like the privilege that comes with that. And, understanding to some extent that, the experience that I've had is not one of the average undergraduate student, and being able to even volunteer our time into, these organizations, which are so time intensive, but also, comes with a lot of professional development, is not something that everyone has access to. I mean, if someone comes from a certain, socioeconomic background, we're not always able to volunteer our time for free. We need to, spend time working and, earning and lots of other things. And not every student, will feel to an extent welcomed and included on campus. And sometimes that comes from a level of insecurity with, academics or how comfortable they feel in certain situations. So that's something that I've really opened up my eyes to as well. I've sort of realized that on one hand, it's great to, celebrate, people who have made a contribution, which we do a lot, right, in terms of awards and things, but as well to create opportunities for people who don't always feel comfortable doing that, or maybe are not always in a situation that allows them to give back as well. But yeah, that's been one of my more recent realizations.
Yeah, that's a great perspective, because like I was thinking back when you were talking about WUSC earlier. WUSC sponsors refugee students that they bring to U of T, right? And so you think about, if like, that's, I think, an example of helping people who don't have the same privileges that we have try and have the same experiences that we've had. And so it's great that we have awards, but it's also great that we're doing things like that to try and offer people who don't have the same opportunity a chance to get the education that can benefit them. And maybe they're going to go home and bring that to their own community, or maybe they're going to stay here and start an NGO and help their community in that way. You never know.
Yeah, exactly. So that's good. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, before med school starts up, are you taking some time off to just relax a little bit and enjoy some hobbies? This is the COVID world we live in, so everyone seems to have a little more free time, and now they don't know what to do with it. People are like, what do I do stuck at home, 20 hours a day or whatever it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been taking more time. So I was like working a couple of jobs like during the quarantine. It just come to an end. We're doing like a project for YSYF, which is sort of taking up quite a bit of time, to be honest. But I'm trying to relax and have some hobbies. Like, what do? I tend to go biking. I've recently got into that. I had a really crazy story with the bike, with how I bought it and how I ended up getting into it. I hadn't actually been on a bike in probably like 10 years. And I just woke up.
Now the question there is, did you remember how to ride the bike when you got back on it?
What a question.
That's what they say, right? It comes back to you right away.
I thought it would. So, I mean, I just like went on a whim and just went to Walmart and got a bike. And there was a bike shortage at the time. And there was like one bike remaining. And the bike was like $400. And I'm like, this is way too expensive for a bike. I was like, no, I am having a great summer. I cannot travel. I cannot go out. I will be riding a bike. So I went and I bought this bike and I could not ride it. It was so, I don't know if it was too tall or what it was, but like it just did not work.
Did you have to walk your bike back home from Walmart?
Oh my God. I didn't even bring a car that could transport the bike. I had to come all the way back, get a different car. Then I brought the bike home. I could not ride it because I didn't even think of sitting on it when I was there. And I returned the bike within an hour of buying it.
Really? Wow.
Really? And then what ended up happening was 3 days later, I was like, you know what? I'm not giving up on this bike. And then I went on Kijiji and found a bike, drove all the way to Oshawa, only to realize it was a child's bike and I could not ride that. No. The story gets crazier and crazier. And then eventually the woman was like, I have another bike that you can buy. And I just got that and ended up working, and I slowly have gained confidence, and now I can ride the bike. So that's what I've been doing.
So not everything has been as planned out as some of what you were talking about earlier, I guess.
No, not at all. And I'm definitely someone I'm someone who gets into these kind of things all the time. Like my friends are like, yeah, yeah, I'm goofy.
Yeah,
like that.
You're the person who they say like, oh yeah, that would happen to you.
100%.
Well, I hope you take some extra time to practice your bike riding skills over the course of the summer.
Thank you.
When is it that med school starts?
I believe the first day of classes is August 24th. As you can see, I'm not there.
Well, that's okay. You still got about 6 weeks before you have to know for sure.
Yeah. So. Yeah, planning on doing like some canoeing, maybe, all within the, respect for social distancing.
Right.
Go out with some friends, maybe.
That's fine. There's like 10,000 lakes in Ontario, so you should be able to find a lake you can canoe on.
Yeah. So that's what I'm planning on doing.
Oh, good. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today and sharing your whole experience. And, students should look out for your NGO, see if they want to get involved. I'm sure there's opportunities for them somewhere down the line. So, once again, thank you so much. And good luck when you do start med school in August something.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me. I really like this initiative. And I think it's really great that we get to hear from students and, a variety of experiences. So kudos on that.
All right. Have a fantastic day.
Okay. You too. Thank you.